Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at partial factoring. Now, the best way, rather than go into steps right away, is we're going to go into it with an example. And I'm going to show you step by step how you would solve this using partial factoring. Now, partial factoring is essentially the same as completing the square at the beginning, whereas you're going to be factoring from the first two terms. Okay, and we are in a Jedi mood right now, so I'm going to go with light side Jedi here. So we're always going to be taking from the first two terms, just like in completing the square. But unlike in completing the square, when we only take the number, we are going to be taking the coefficient and the variable. So your first step is to factor the coefficient and the variable from the first two terms only. Okay, so only the first two terms. All right, so in this case, we're going to factor out the 4 and we're going to factor out the x. And we're going to take that out from the first two terms, which is going to leave me with, in this case, 4 divided by 4 is 1, x squared divided by x is x, so I'm left with an x. And 16 divided by 4 is 4, minus 4 in this case, and of course the x's are gone. And we close our bracket. And the 21 is just hanging out over there. Here is where the methods differ. In our second step, we are going to set it equal to 0. So we're going to set f of x equal to 0 and solve for our x's. Okay, so in this case, we've got equal to 0. So we're going to have 4x is equal to 0 or x minus 4 is equal to 0. So in this case, x is going to be 0. Or, if I move the minus 4 to the other side by adding it, x is going to be 4. All right. Now, one thing you need to know about these two numbers, if I were to put them back into my equation, so if I were to put these back into my equation, let's try that out. So if I said f of 0. Well, f of 0 is equal to 21. And if I put f of 4 in, well, 4 squared is going to be 16. 16 times 4 is 64. And I've got minus 16 times 4, which is also 64. They cancel out, leaving me also with 21. So if I were to put these into a graph, you'll notice they're going to make out 2 points staring directly at each other, exactly at both ends of a parabola. So if I want to find my axis of symmetry, or if I want to find the middle point, I would need to find the average. So my third step is find the average of my two x's, the ones I just solved. Okay, so I take that 0 and I'm going to add it to 4, and if I'm taking an average, there's 2 of them, so I divide by 2. 0 plus 4 is 4, and divided by 2 is 2. So this is my x, which is my axis of symmetry. Now if I want to find my max or my min, in this case, this is a positive 4, in which case we say this is going to be facing upwards, hence it is going to be a minimum. So to find my max or min, in this case it's a min, you're going to substitute that number, which is 2, into the equation for my final step. So my final step, substitute the average into the equation. Okay, so you're going to have 4 times 2 squared minus 16 times 2 plus 21. And if I solve this out, well, 2 squared is 4 times 4 is 16 minus 16 times 2, which is 32. So this is going to give me 5. So therefore, my minimum is 5 in this case. All right, and that's with all the steps. So let's use these steps in another example, one with some decimals, and I can show you that this works no matter what. Remember, we're going to practice the steps. Let's go. Okay, so in example 2, I want you to try to pause it and try it yourself before I actually do it. And then I want you to unpause the video and see if you are following the steps correctly. Okay? So first things first. My first step, if you remember, is to factor out the a value from the first two terms. So I'm going to factor out the negative 0.3, but not just the negative 0.3, but also the x. And that's going to leave me with positive x, and negative divided by negative is positive, so and a positive 8. And then the 0.73. All right. Once again, we're going to make it equal to 0, just like we did before. Solve for my x's. Or x plus 8 is equal to 0. All right, so in this case, x is also going to be equal to 0. And in this case, if I move the plus 8 to the other side by subtracting it, I'm going to be left with x is negative 8. Okay, now the third step, we want to take the average of these two numbers. So 0 plus negative 8 divided by 2, which is going to give you negative 4. All right. Plus minus is the same thing as saying minus, so you got 0 minus 8, so that's negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. And then finally, we're going to substitute. I'm going to use different color each one to show the steps. Negative 4 is equal to, so you're going to substitute it in, 0.3, negative 4 squared, minus 2.4, negative 4, plus 7.3. And when I calculate this all out, you should get a value of 12.1. Now, 12.1, is that going to be my maximum or minimum? Well, let's use some hot pink here. If I'm using hot pink, I'm going to be circling this a value here. It's negative, which means my quadratic is going down, in which case I have a maximum. So therefore, my maximum is at 12.1. And that's the second example. So as you can see, the steps work every time. It doesn't matter how weird your numbers get or how big they get. You're always going to do the same stuff. You're always going to take away your a value and the x from the first two terms. You are then going to find your two x values. You take the average of your x values, then substitute it into your original equation to find your max or min. I hope this has helped you with your partial factoring, and have a wonderful day.